like a river attendeth my way. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
In November 1873, a guy named Horatio Spafford put his wife Anna and their 4 daughters on an iron steamship in New York. They were headed to Europe. He was supposed to be on the boat with them, but a last-minute business obligation caused him to have to go back home to Chicago, and the idea is he would catch up with them a little bit later. The trip was a needed change of scenery for his family and for Horatio. He was a lawyer, and he had made some really smart investments, and he became fairly wealthy. But the Chicago fire of 1871, followed by a market panic, had wiped out much of his wealth. And his family just needed a reset. So the girls boarded the ship that day, and they waved goodbye. It was the last time he would see his daughters. 1 week into their journey, their boat collided with a British clipper, and it took just 12 minutes for the boat to sink. 226 people died that day. Spafford's wife, Anna, survived by holding onto a floating piece of wood. So he heard about the accident, of course, but he didn't know what had happened with his family until he got a 2-word telegram from his wife. And it said simply, saved alone. As Horatio traveled in his grief across the same body of water to meet his devastated wife, the captain slowed the ship and quietly said to him, "This is the place where it happened." Can you imagine that moment? Standing over the spot where your whole world disappeared? What do you say to God there? What do you pray when heaven feels silent? In that moment, with grief deeper than most of us can comprehend, Horatio didn't write a complaint. He wrote a song. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Many of us here, we hear stories like Horatio Spafford and all the tragedy that he experienced, and our initial reaction then is to just compare. We say things like, well, whatever I'm going through now, it isn't as bad as that. But the truth is, we can always find someone, somewhere, some real life story of somebody that has it worse than we do. It's true. But that kind of thinking is deflection. It's an attempt to minimize our own trauma, or worse, to deny our own pain. The question we ought to ask is not who's got it worse than I do, but how should I respond right now? Because there's not a single person here today who gets spared from loss and pain and suffering and tragedy. We experience it in different ways, of course, and at different times, but nobody is exempted from this part of the human experience, and you can't buy your way out of it either. The wealthiest and most powerful don't get a pass, which is why we're turning in the Bible to the Book of Ruth for these next 4 weeks in this new series, When Life Gets Hard. Ruth is just 4 chapters, but it's rich with application that will affect all of our lives. It deals with really powerful, potent stuff like loyalty and faithfulness, loss and bitterness, redemption and provision and hope, and we won't have time to cover all of those things, of course. But the point is that the book is ripe with practical insight for God to interact with each of us exactly where our lives are today. And the whole thing begins rooted in tragedy. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. So this is how the book begins, and we're not even at the real tragedy yet. But from the outset, there's this sense of desperation. There's famine. We have a timeline. When it says in the days when the judges ruled, we know then that this is post-conquest. And for those of you who are students of the Bible, you'll recognize that language. But just to catch all of us up, after the people of God they're called the Jews, the Hebrews, and the Israelites. Those are basically interchangeable titles in the Bible. After they wander around the desert for 40 years, after they're released from Pharaoh in Egypt, from slavery in Egypt, they wander around for 40 years, and then God finally delivers them to the promised land. It's called that because God promised to give it to his people through their ancestor Abraham. And that promise was repeated by God again and again throughout generations. It was something everybody knew. So Joshua then, Moses' protege, the guy that Moses kind of coaches, Joshua leads the people of God to conquer those living in the promised land. And once they do that, God's people move into the land where roughly the nation of Israel is today. So the days when the judges ruled, when the scripture tells us that, it's saying this happens after Joshua, after they take the land, but before there is a king like David. And that era of time, the people are governed by judges, which you can read about in the Bible, in the book that bears that name. But here's what's interesting. The promised land gets a nickname. God gives the promised land a nickname. He calls it the land flowing with milk and honey. which means that it's rich with resources and it's plentiful with food. But I want you to note that Naomi and Elimelech, they leave that land because of famine. They literally leave because they aren't able to find food. See, during the Judges era, the people of God were infamously fickle in their commitment to God. Most people don't understand this, that when God made the covenant with his people, it was really a two-way covenant. It was at least in part conditional, because God was saying, listen, and you can read this over and over again. He says, you serve me, you follow me as your God, you worship only me as your God, and I will then provide for you, and I will bless you, and I will protect you. So when the people walked away from God, they walked away not only from his protection, but his provision. So the land stopped flowing with milk and honey, so to speak. In this way, the story here begins not only with a physical famine, that is lack of food, but a spiritual famine, that is a disconnect with God. So Elimelech and Naomi and their sons, they leave and they travel to Moab. I wanted you to see this, and this map does the best that I could find. Forget the title that says Ruth and Naomi's Journey. We're going to get to that next week. And to this body of water over here to the left is the Mediterranean Sea. And where it says Judah, this is basically where Israel is today. So Bethlehem is where Bethlehem is today, and they live there. And so Naomi and Elimelech and their boys, they travel around the Dead Sea and then south to Moab. And this journey would be like 50 miles or so. It would be rocky terrain. It would be steep. There would be harsh conditions. At times, they might be subject to bandits and other people that are trying to take advantage of sort of folks that are traveling along the road. And the journey would be hard. That's the point. And that indicates they knew it would be hard. So it kind of goes to show how bad things would be back home in order for them to undertake this dangerous, hard journey. So they come to Moab in search for a better life, but in reality, when they get there, things only get worse. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They married Moabite women, so they grow up in Moab, married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And after they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion, those are the sons, they also died. And Naomi was left without her two sons and without her husband. So we begin with famine, and at least the family is intact, right? So we leave, we're hungry, we can't find food, but our family's together. They move to Moab, a foreign country, where there's no support system, and after they get there, Elimelech dies. The dad, the husband. Now, we don't know how he died, what caused it. We don't exactly know where the timeline is. We just know it's after they get there. And we do know, though, that Naomi had been in Moab for about a decade when then also her two boys died. We also don't know how they died. So in this era, women had no way to support themselves. Society was structured so that a woman had to have a man of some kind, a husband, a dad, a brother, an uncle, somebody. So Naomi has no larger family system here in Moab. There aren't any cousins or whatever. She's in a foreign country. There's nobody to provide for her. So we started the story from verse 1 in famine, and then things just get a lot worse. Loss after loss after loss. And at some point, you can almost hear the question that's forming in her heart, like, God, is this you? Are you against me? Because here's the thing. When everything's going well for your life, when it's full and all you can see are blessings and everything's up and to the right and everything you touch works out and turns to gold, when everything in life is full, it's easy to believe that God is present. But when everything is taken, when all you're left with is grief, you don't need explanations. You think you need explanations, which is why in those moments, which come to all of us, by the way, we tend to ask why. Why is this happening? Why me? All the things. Because we think the answer will help us, but it won't. Why is not really helpful. What is helpful in times of trauma is the one question that Naomi did ask, which is some version of, is God still there? Is he there? Because he didn't show up where she wanted, but God did show up. And that's the whole point. Here's how. When Naomi heard in Moab, she's still in Moab, that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home. So Naomi stands at a crossroads, not with answers, but with loss. Not with clarity, but with questions. And here's what's striking about it. She doesn't get a vision. You know, so many times you read a story in the Bible, and sometimes this happens in modern day life too, and somebody's crying out to God and they feel like they really hear from God. Somebody got a vision. We have burning bushes and all kinds of things like that in the Bible. But Naomi doesn't get that. She doesn't get a vision. She doesn't get a promise from God. She doesn't even really get any reassurance from God. She just hears that the famine back home is over. That's it. And in that small whisper, she feels a sense of hope because she sees that God is moving and God is working. And that's enough for her to do the only thing she knows to do, to get up and start walking towards God, towards where God is and where he's moving. And this is where her story and our story can intersect. Because when we face loss of some kind, we want God to give us the whole plan, right? We're in a bad spot. We want the explanation, like answer some why questions. And then we want God to give us the timeline for how it's all going to work out. And then we want to guarantee that it's all going to turn out, really well, which means in our favor. Now, I don't know about you, but God doesn't ever work with me that way. I've never had God sit down and say, just let me map this whole thing out for you. This is going to be like there's a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. Let me just show it to you. That never happens. He gives us something smaller and harder, but something more potent. What he gives us, what you can guarantee you'll get from God, is one step. One step. And this is a major application for us because when you can't see the whole plan, you just take the next step. You just take the next step. Naomi does not know where this is going to lead. She knows she's going to go back home, but she doesn't really know what's going to happen. What she does know is even though she can't figure out how God is working, she does know that God is working. And you and I can know that too, that God is always at work around us. Even if we don't have all the questions answered, that's where faith really happens. Not having everything figured out, but refusing to stay stuck. Not having clarity, but choosing obedience anyway. Because in seasons of loss, listen up, the enemy wants you paralyzed. That's what he wants. If he can't destroy your faith altogether, he'll try to freeze it. He'll make it stand still. He'll get you asking all the wrong questions, questions that will keep you stuck. Questions like, why did this happen? Why did it happen to me? Why did it happen now? Why did it happen this way? And we can ask those questions, don't get me wrong. If we're honest, we all do that from time to time, particularly in seasons of great loss. I get it. But you can't live there. Do you want to know why? Because there's no life there. Life is found when we keep moving, when we keep taking one right step. Naomi doesn't have answers, but she has enough faith to take one step. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is the next right thing you know you ought to do. You might know, if you've been around for a while, I've talked about this several times. I struggled with clinical depression for a while, about 15 or so years ago. And during that season, I wanted to stay stuck. Seriously, I wanted to keep the curtains closed and I wanted to stay in bed all day, every day. If you've never been depressed, I mean really legit depressed, then you don't know that I'm not exaggerating. I literally would have stayed in a dark room by myself all the time. But I knew I had to move. And the only step that I could see to take was to go see a skilled doctor and a counselor that I trusted. I did not know what was going to happen after that. I could not see past that step. I just knew I had to do those things. And so I had to push against the drive to stay stuck, which was painful. I had to create inertia because I was completely still. I had to pray when I felt empty. I had to move when I thought I couldn't. But I took one step. And then I found out after I took that step that there was one more step. And then I found out after I took that step that there was one more step. The first step was to go see the doctor. When I went to see him, he said, you're going to have to get on some medicine. And I hated the idea of it, hated it. And I told him so in no uncertain terms. But what I was doing was not working. And I trusted this guy, and so I followed his advice. My counselor guided me to take some deliberate action, some specific steps, one at a time. And some of those, I hated those ideas too. And I told him, but I trusted him. So I took one step, and then I took one more step. And then I took one more step. It's important you know I didn't know all these steps in advance. I just knew one step. When I finished that one, I found out what the next one was. Then I took that one. Each one of these steps slowly emerging me from my agony, each one revealing the presence of God and tapping into his power, which was unlocked. This is important. God's power was unlocked by my willingness to take one step. One step, one step, one step. Naomi's next step was to go home. She was taking her next right step, but her heart, this is important, was still broken, deeply broken. Not only from the loss of her husband and her two sons, which would have been enough, but with now this deep disillusionment she has with God. And this is why I love the Bible so much, because so much of the time in the Bible, it's very unflattering to the people who are trying to follow God. And it's so real that we can see ourselves in it. Let me show you. Naomi goes home. She actually goes back to Bethlehem. She reverses the route on the map that we just looked at. She went from Moab back around the Dead Sea, back to Bethlehem. She gets there, and when she arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Remember, she's been gone for a decade. "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara." You know what Naomi means in Hebrew? We're going to say that. I'm going to say this again next week. So you know what Naomi means in Hebrew? It means sweet. You know what Mara means? It means bitter. She says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full. The Lord brought me back empty. Why would you call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." See, Naomi takes the step, but we don't need to clean this up. I don't want to try to make it pretty or churchy or to fit our nice spiritual mold, which is so many times what we do with our lives. The truth is, Naomi does take the next step, and she's still broken, and she's still grieving, and she's still confused, and she's more than a little bit angry at God. She literally says, "The Almighty has made my life bitter. He sent me away full. He brought me home empty." That's in the Bible, which means you can be moving toward God while still wrestling with God. These are not mutually exclusive ideas. You can be moving toward God because you know it's your one right step and still be frustrated or wrestling with God at the same time. And then, before the first chapter ends, there is this most powerful sentence. It's a little bit hidden, but let me show it to you. Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law. We'll get to that next week. Arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Do you see it? There is a harvest coming. It's both literal and it is spiritual. It is figurative. The harvest is coming. In spite of her pain and her loss, the author of this book hints to something good that's about to happen. All because Naomi chased after God even when she didn't feel like it. She took the next right step, and it yielded a glimpse of hope for her because there's a harvest coming. You can take the step that is right and still not feel right. This is important because feelings are fickle. You can take the step that is right and still not feel right. Some of us need to hear that because you believed this lie that said, if your faith is strong enough, then you would never feel this way. But Naomi did. She did feel this way. She was still upset with God, and she still walked toward him. And because of it, there is a harvest coming. See, this kind of faith, it's not theory. It's not just something we read about in the pages of the Bible. It's something we see. You and I can see it around us in people right now. There are people who have walked through diagnosis after diagnosis and heartbreak after heartbreak and tragedy after tragedy and loss after loss that didn't let up. And somewhere along the way, though they had every reason to give up, every reason to stay stuck, every reason to say, God, you're against me, and therefore I'm walking the other way, they didn't do that. Not because it was easy, but because they chose again and again one step. The next right step, then one step, and then one step. And I want you to see this. I don't want you to just hear about it. I want you to feel it. Because the story you're about to watch, it's not polished faith. It's not easy faith, but it is real faith. This is what it looks like to walk through cancer and family brokenness and abandonment and still somehow trust God enough to take one step. Take a look.
Some of my personal challenges during life, there's been quite a few. Got a couple years into college and I made the decision to start using drugs. And for 3 years, I was heavy in my addiction with multiple arrests, countless felonies, and I ended up getting pregnant when I was 24. And I got down on my knees and I prayed to God and I cussed at him and I told him, if you don't save me, me and this baby are gonna die. Do something, I don't care, but you're the only one who can make it happen because clearly I can't do it on my own. And that next day, the attorney called. He said, look, I'm gonna work a deal with the prosecutor. I just need you to stay out of trouble. That's easier said than done for somebody who's in active addiction. And it was in that moment that I realized that, that was it. I had to get my life together. I found a church that was local to the rehab that they would take me by van. I knew it was my faith in God that was gonna keep me sober. And then in 2012, my dad decided to drive his own life off a cliff, and he had an affair. He was Savannah's whole world, and he left. And trying to get through that was really difficult. I'd gotten married after I had moved to Virginia. I married a man who was a pagan. Eventually, within months, he had started coming to church and turned his whole life over to Christ. And it was beautiful. I was married to him for 10 years, and then he too decided to do what my dad did and have an affair and drive his life off of a cliff. And, it left me in Savannah again. I went to the Amazon on a mission trip, and I knew that God was calling me to go. It was absolutely beautiful. And then I came back from Brazil, was having lunch one day with Savannah, and she said, Mom, I noticed something was wrong with your face. And she said, you need to go to the doctor, Mom, you had a stroke. I was diagnosed with Bell's palsy. And progressively over the next few months, it kind of started to get worse. I started getting headaches, just 10-minute headaches in the middle of the night, but it was horrendous. And so by the third time I had gotten one, that Sunday morning, I had to go to church first. I had priorities. So I went to church and then left there and went to the emergency room. And I wasn't telling anyone where I was going because I was like, this is just crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. And it was diagnosed as cancer. After that, it was scan after appointment and appointment and scan and appointment, and surgery was 12 hours. They removed my inner ear and my eardrum because it had traveled into my ear, and so now I'm deaf in my left ear, and removed part of my jaw. The cancer was in my jaw, and then they'd taken it out of my salivary gland. I prayed in that hospital room to God, just let me go home. I got this. They started coming in, and the physical therapist said, you're gonna have to get up and walk. And I said, let's go. I was not staying in that hospital. I got this. You gave me the physicians to fix me. Let's go. I have a life to live. I ended up doing 7 weeks of daily radiation every single day. And they told me, they said, you're going to have sores in your mouth. You're going to have sores on your face. You're not going to be able to eat food after 2 weeks. And I said, oh no, you don't believe in the same God I do, because like that's not happening to me. I don't know if that happens to other people, but it's not happening to me. Anyways, I got through radiation and I rang the bell. I was cleared of cancer. I had to do my 6-month post-op scan. I got the call that the cancer was now in my lungs, so the cancer had come back. Today, I've got lung cancer. I've got a spot in my skull up here, and I've got a spot in my orbital bone up here. Bonus, it's not in my brain, and it's not in my eyeball, so I can still see and I still am smart. Jeremiah 29:11 is one of my favorite verses, but the other one is one that I have tattooed on me right here, and it's Psalm 91:4. I'll find refuge underneath his wings. And I've always felt like that. Like I'm always protected by him. He's not going to let anything happen to me.
How can you say that when so much has happened to you?
I just believe that God didn't make any of this happen. He didn't say, I'm gonna give you cancer, Shanoa. But I think that in those things that have happened, even out of the tragedies, that there's so much good that could come out of it. And he's there to show us, look, I can, not fix this, but I can show you. I can show you what the good is that's gonna come out of this. I never questioned God. Like that was, my faith never wavered. If anything, I was pouring more into God. Like I need you more now than ever. If I was to lose my life to cancer, I'll be in the arms of Jesus, so I know it's gonna be good for me. I'm good. And so, what's hard for me is that the ones that I leave behind, I hope that they understand that, I'm in the best place that I can be, and we're all eventually gonna be together. And, and maybe some time in it, but we're gonna be together. So I was shopping with Jean Kingery, and she sees these signs. And she said, Shanoa, look at this sign. And it says, I trust the next chapter because I know the author. And I do.
I trust the next chapter because I know the author. Shanoa knows that a harvest is coming. But she really knows it, one way or the other. And it makes her one of the most inspiring people I think I've ever met. She has this resolve to trust God no matter what. Even in spite of real trauma and abandonment and betrayal and tragedy and sickness and pain. And I think, if she still trusts God and believes the harvest is coming and still takes one more step and then one more step and still chases after God after all she's been through, well, I can do that too. And so can you. James, the brother of Jesus, who was no stranger to suffering and loss and tragedy, and he wrote these words embedded in the Bible for you and me. He said, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. You can do that. You can let perseverance in your loss and pain finish its work and make you mature and complete. So may you follow the example of Naomi today. Push through in honesty, but with resolve, and rejoice in your trials, trusting that God is at work in all of it to make something amazing happen. The harvest is coming.
trials of many kinds, when I am given over to resurrection life, the glory that is coming, oh, is truly coming soon. Jesus, what an honor to suffer well with you. When you prayed in the garden, you first began to bleed. You want us to keep watch with you, but I still fall asleep. On Golgotha you suffered and fully paid the cost to give me the power to carry my own cross. There is great rejoicing in trials of many kinds, when I am given over to resurrection life. The glory that is coming, oh, is truly coming soon. Jesus, what an honor to suffer well with you. My soul has learned to trust in you, that your life in me might be witness. Here I find the power of Christ to carry the weight, to participate, to live in the light of your goodness. There is great rejoicing in trials of many kinds, when I am given over to resurrection life. The glory that is coming, oh, is truly coming soon. Jesus, what an honor to suffer well with you.
A harvest is coming. Even though it might feel out of reach to you right now, even though you might feel like God doesn't see you right now, He does. And all He asks of you is to trust Him and just take the next step. Just take the next step, and then the next one, and then the next one. And eventually you will reach the harvest, which is coming. We would love to pray with you, speak with you, process with you, anything you're struggling right now with. So please reach out to me anytime. Request prayer right here in the chat right now. We're going to be hanging out for a little bit longer, even though the service is about to end. We would love to speak with you. We would love to walk with you and encourage you to just take the next step. Thank you so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing you and a friend next week.